And speaking of ecosystems, I know you recently launched something called the Southern Communities Initiative. And
Right.
I'd love to ask you to tell us a little bit about that, because as I understand it, that really is focused on building ecosystems.
Yeah, it's and happy to share some thoughts on it. Out of the work that we did at the Business Roundtable, we really started to evaluate, okay, where are the critical needs and gaps in providing, think about, economic inclusivity. So you think about everything from wealth creation, education, housing, health equity, criminal justice, political representation, all those things. Now, I focused with Jamie Dimon on finance and how we're going to focus really on how do you drive, banking infrastructure into the communities. Like I said, it became clear that larger banks aren't economically interested in putting physical infrastructure there. So as we started to decouple this, I kind of pulled in a couple of pals, Rich Lesser, who runs BCG, and Dan Schulman, who runs PayPal, and said, let's really evaluate how this could work. And as we did work, my team and their teams, what we determined was the following: okay, why don't we look and figure out how we could create economic models at scale? And rather than pick one city, let's look at, 6. So we picked 6 cities in the South: Atlanta, Memphis, New Orleans, Birmingham, Houston, and Charlotte, and said, now let's look at these different layers. Okay, one of the most important, of course, is broadband, and I'll address that in a second. The second is, enablement of the CDFIs and MDIs. The third is, how do you bring capital into those communities? And said, so what we've done is we said, first of all, let's have an understanding of what the challenge is and how we're going to address each one of those layers and who are the right sort of partner organizations that we have. So in each one of those communities, we now have a overall partner organization. For instance, in Atlanta, it's the King Center. Bernice King, Dr. Bernice King runs that. And then we started bringing other partners, saying, how do we bring these layers of infrastructure to create these I'm going to call them, economic opportunity ecosystems. At the first level, we just ended up getting another, call it $150 million grant from Cisco, and we're modernizing the entire infrastructure of every HBCU. And we're going to start in those 6 cities. Okay, when you modernize that infrastructure, you now have broadband. When you have broadband in those HBCUs in those communities, you now can make that extensible to the businesses. Okay, that now can participate. That modernization does a bunch of things. One is, one really important, it keeps them eligible for Title IV funding. So about $1 billion a year flows through those ecosystems, and if they don't have modern, cybersecurity protection, identification, all those sort of information, then they lose that funding. So now we have a way to solidify that basically in perpetuity. 2, we now have the ability to create that broadband infrastructure, which enables the next generation of opportunity for small and medium businesses. I'll just give one other example. We took the Grameen Foundation. Grameen, many of you all know from Muhammad Yunus and Bangladesh. There's a Grameen America. Partner them now with NAACP. We're going to start with 3 cities. And in essence, they have a system where we're now able to, create between 500 and 1,000 small businesses in those communities. And, I'm doing a matching grant with another, for instance, Regions Bank in Atlanta, and saying, okay, let's use that as one of the economic generating engines to support, this activity. So if you think about it as layering, in essence, partnerships, public-private partnerships, layering, capacity building, and infrastructure capability. And then now we're getting, corporate donations, the Walton Foundation, Kellogg Foundation, and others are saying, we like this because now we see, a systemic approach that creates an economic inclusive engine as opposed to a one-time grant. And so, for instance, Kellogg Foundation is working with us to say, okay, which of the CDFIs should we actually target in those 6 cities to do the modernization capacity first? So it's in a nutshell, kind of holistically how we're thinking about these 6 communities. And if you actually take those 6 communities, those 6 cities, 100-mile radius around each of those 6 cities, you touch 50% of the African-American population. So as we get those up and running, then that will be, call it the model that should be self-sustaining and a very efficient, upward of $100 billion of economic impact from just enabling these communities to be effective, having access to capital, access to broadband, and then you can start layering on the, access to education through, wellness through telemedicine. All those sorts of things are elements that lay on top, but you got to put those that basic infrastructure in first.
It's so timely, this initiative, and in so many ways, it's so aligned with so much of the work that we're doing. I think I had mentioned to you before we got started that we at Inclusive, we run something called the Southern Equity Fund that invests secondary capital in community development credit unions, CDFI and MDI credit unions throughout the South. And we have a huge number, about 40% of all of our members are in that Southern region, but a lot of them are in those cities. And two things that are really interesting. One is many of our members have started forging partnerships with HBCUs around things like with their schools of social work to be able to have students who are trained in social work also become trained as financial counselors and coaches and small business trainers. So there's a really fabulous kind of alignment there. And of course, I have to always keep thinking about how perfect this timing is, given that, last year our network stepped up during the Paycheck Protection Program. And, when businesses in their communities were not being able to get access through the big banks, they came to the credit unions. Right. And many of our members had not even been SBA lenders until that time. They got on, they became SBA lenders, they got started, and they originated about $2 billion worth of PPP loans just last year. Right. And then again in PPP2, another, kind of equal, if not more amount. But now we're trying to figure out with them, where do we go from here with so many of these businesses that are now part of our membership, that are part of the credit union. There's a real need for them to get to the next level of financing. And certainly those are loans that credit unions, love to make and can make. But a lot of the businesses, during the PPP process, they needed some extra work. They needed to get sort of a lot of their own kind of books in order, a lot of their kind of documentation together. Right. So
I'll tell you, Kathy, that's the wonderful thing, frankly, about technology and software in particular. One, as you know this, once you implement and modernize your banks and solutions, you typically can now process loans in, half the time and do 3 times the volume, right? So that's point one. Point two, it actually trains your customers, because there's constructs in the software that says, here's what you actually have to do. It can teach and train them how to be more effective at bookkeeping, more effective at scheduling, more effective at, managing everything from, their payroll systems to ensuring that they're remaining compliant. And so that digital monetization, which is occurring everywhere on the planet, now has to be very much a part of the vocabulary and the narrative of your credit union groups. Okay, they have to digitize, modernize, and also view themselves as ecosystem hubs, because the more digitally enabled they make their customers, the more effective they're going to be as lenders to those customers. You now can start to evaluate quickly, what the working capital needs are of those businesses, and start to offer products and solutions and services to your customers. If you're in the dark about what they're doing because they're walking in with a stack of papers in a shoebox, then that's really hard to sort through. But if it's all digitized, and again, we've worked and built solutions in tandem with Finastra and Microsoft to help these small businesses, become a part of that, because that enablement is often, like I said, a 900% ROI for a small business who's using software. Enables them to be more effective. They become more effective at scheduling their customers, the payment plans, the payments from their customers, their cash flow. That is what you'll see is an entire economic uplift leveraging technology. So the first step was getting them capital during to survive at least the early stages of this pandemic. The next step is now, how do you digitally enable your entire ecosystem to be more effective at utilizing capital to grow their businesses, improve the employment prospects in their communities, in those small to medium businesses. And I think that's what we now need to take on as a challenge, is view yourselves as ecosystem hubs, not just a service provider episodically.
Absolutely. Boy, sign us up. This is, this is exactly where we need to be. And as ecosystem hubs, it challenges all of us to rethink our business models away from just that service delivery, and as what's so lovely about community development credit unions is we are financial cooperatives. So that cooperative element, that empowerment element, that local ownership of assets element is part of our DNA. So I love it.
And I would tie into it, and I'll tell you one of the things we're doing, for instance, in the digital upgrade of the HBCUs, we made it a central part of the program that HBCU students will be interns who are part of that upgrade. So I would encourage all of you all to now, again, leverage intern networks, students who are juniors and seniors, STEM students. Again, they're digital natives. I'm a digital immigrant. I came to this in high school and later, and they have a perspective on how they engage with the world, which is very different than people my generation engage with the world. Utilize that talent and that capability and that view on the world to help think about how you can actually provide services and solutions to the young entrepreneurs, businesses in your community that are going to be the backbone of the new economy. But if you don't have that view and you haven't embraced that, and I think interns are the best way to embrace it in my mind early on, because they're young, impressionable, and haven't learned bad habits, right? That's a good way. That's a good way to start to bring that sort of flow. I'll give you an example. It's really interesting. There's a bank that is a customer of ours in Indonesia. And I know the CEO quite well, and I've been and visited a couple of times. And 8 years ago, 9 years ago, they realized a digital revolution was coming. They had no digital services to speak of. And they also realized they had a talent problem. Where we're going to get these folks? Well, they embarked on a mission to retrain all of their people, and they almost now a completely digital bank. They've eclipsed the size of what was their biggest competitor in Singapore, and actually bought one of their biggest competitors, and have increased their market cap by, I think, over 30x over that period of time. And they didn't actually go through a massive influx of new people. They just retrained. They focused on educating and training their people, and they did that by implementing digital solutions that help teach and train how to become a more digital-oriented bank. So it can be done. Wow. But you just have to show the leadership, and it created massive, market cap value for them, an opportunity. And with your mission being one centered around the community, use this as an opportunity to upgrade the talent and skills and capability of your people, and then leverage that to do the same thing for the ecosystem of the businesses in your communities.
And I love the combination of bringing in the interns and the sort of the next generation, but also retraining those of us who need to upgrade our skills, who need to get up on that.